Imagine managing thousands or even millions of industrial devices, spread across the globe, each one critical to keeping factories running and products moving. The stakes are high, downtime costs money, reliability is paramount, and the pressure is on for design engineers to ensure everything works seamlessly. In today's episode, we're diving deep into how cutting-edge tools are helping design engineers tackle these challenges head-on. Reliability, uptime, and how new solutions are pushing industrial IoT to its limits.
Big issues. If we're going to bring this IoT world to life, these things have to be kept up to date with their software, they have to be energy efficient, and they have to have lots of uptime. So, if you're a design engineer today working in industrial electronics, what are your options today if, let's say, Francois from Memfault did not exist?
Right. So I think today what we see is making sure devices have high uptime is increasingly important, right? Like, whether they're industrial or not, but certainly in the industrial context. For two reasons. First of all is in the industrial context, there's an expectation of reliability, right? If a device is on an assembly line and it's working 24 hours a day, downtime costs money. The device stops working, the line is stopped. That's in some cases, that's actually millions of dollars per hour. It can be really, really expensive. The other piece is that IoT device makers and industrial IoT device makers increasingly have moved to a service model where they charge not to sell you a device, but rather they charge for an ongoing service fee as you use the device. And so why does this matter? It's because if the device stops working, you can no longer collect that service fee. And so as a business, you're very motivated to look at reliability. So I think first, right, like reliability is increasingly top of mind. And so folks are doing something about it. And so before Memfault existed, what did that look like? Overwhelmingly, it was folks building solutions in-house. They might, for example, during our years at Pebble, we built a homegrown analytics collection system where we could collect, statistics from the device. We see many companies doing that, right? Big industrial groups who I talk to regularly have huge initiatives to, build an in-house observability team who can unify the data across all of their devices. The other thing they do is they engage some cloud observability vendors, who are used to serving, mobile applications, desktop applications, cloud applications, and they try to figure out, can we jam IoT data into these systems so that we can start getting some observability? And so the first thing that happens is that eventually we manage to get some data flowing, right? We start collecting the temperature of the device, let's say, because that's a good indicator of whether it's working properly or not. We start doing that across our product lines, and eventually we find out that we've now built 8 different ways to collect the same data across all of our product lines, and a real kind of IT project needs to take place, institutionalizing that capability.
Now, the point there is consistency, isn't it? You could end up with, various product lines communicating up with the cloud, but in different ways, as opposed to it being consistent and in one way.
Right.
Which is actually quite key because you're not learning as you're going along, because one could go down, the others operate, and you won't know the reason why.
Right, because the key of observability is being able to observe everything, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you have 5 different dashboards for your 5 different products, all being sold to the same customers on the same product line. In order for you to know whether things are working or not, you're going to look at 5 different places. It doesn't work, right?
I think that might be the definition of insanity.
It's completely insane, and we see this a lot. And so instead, and so why does this happen? I think this is an interesting piece. Is there is such diversity in the devices that we build, right? You've got some environmental sensors who are connected over Zigbee, right? And you've got some terminals that the operators on the factory line are using that are connected over Bluetooth. You've got big machines that are connected over Ethernet. And these devices run Linux, or they run RTOSes, or they run bare metal software, or VxWorks, or Androids, what have you. And so they're very, very different. And it takes quite a sophisticated system to get a picture of the health of all of these devices. Because, let me ask you a question. I know the questions go the other way around usually, but let me ask you a question, Guy. If you were to come up with a standardized metric for whether or not things are working, what would it look like? This is not straightforward, right?
No,
Do you have any
and
idea?
I mean, you've got so many stakeholders in that too. You've got so many stakeholders deciding what is good, what is an upside, what is the result that we want. So I think that where we started was tens, hundreds, thousands of devices in the field. Of course, with all design, the whole point is that we're talking about legacy. And we're talking about trying to do the right thing every day. And if you started today, you would have had legacy that will have said of all those things that you talked about: software, hardware, the environment that these devices are in. So there's an intricacy of legacy which has somehow managed, like a network of somehow we've managed to keep all of this together. And every time we've had to improve, we've added another little bit of legacy. So what you're describing is, shall we say, organized chaos, because they must be getting the outcome that they want, but there's no definitive system that says this is the way that we do it. This will give us a true output all the time. This is we know that we can then communicate with the devices. So good. We've discussed, should we just agree, organized chaos, because I'm sure everybody's always doing the right thing. No one sets out to do the wrong thing in these scenarios.
Yeah,
absolutely. So let's just talk about then, you've got these hundreds of devices, thousands of devices out in the field in industrial application. You've just described any downtime is serious amounts of money. You've described a changing model where they're selling a service model as opposed to a product model. So, if your device is not working, you are not going to be sending a bill to the customer because there was downtime. So just explain to us then, for an industrial application, taking away that organized chaos, what does Memfault deliver?
Right. So we delivered, I think, two things in my opinion. The first thing is we deliver expertise in selecting or in kind of identifying the right measure for success for the device. So I'll explain why this matters. What we want to know as engineers is my device working? Okay. Or is it performing satisfactorily, which is actually more so than a binary working or not. It's what's the performance? But
there's parameters in there. There's parameters of.
But that's easier said than done, right? It's like, what is performance? How do you define it? And how do you define it in such a way that you can normalize it across a very complex product portfolio, so that you don't have to kind of reconfigure your brain every time you look at a different device, but rather get an overall picture of fleet health and product quality. And so that's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about, and we've ended up building, what we're calling device vitals, which are out of the box kind of data points that can be applied to any kind of device to get a picture of its quality. And so we call them stability, connectivity, and battery life. So not every device is a battery, but it applies, I think, broadly to those that do, because we find that if your product is stable, as in it's in a normal operating mode most of the time, and your device is connected reliably, no matter the application, you're already a lot of the way to quality. And I think that's something that Memfault provide that's really valuable. Some normalized, standardized view of quality. The second thing we provide that I think is equally valuable is infrastructure to collect, parse and store and identify trends from this data. So we have built a very complex data pipeline which can accommodate IP and non-IP devices, so devices connected over LTE, connected over Wi-Fi, connected over Ethernet, Bluetooth, Zigbee, proprietary protocols, what have you, USB. We can accommodate all of it. We ingest that data, and then we have built a very sophisticated analytical system that indexes that data and lets you ask questions and visualize that data. This is easy to build for 100 devices because there's so little data that querying it doesn't require sophisticated systems. But when you're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of devices, it becomes an extremely difficult engineering problem, and one that hardware companies are not well equipped to tackle. And so between the combination of a really sophisticated data pipeline and data system, plus some opinionated, out-of-the-box, standardized metrics for quality, I think this is quite a compelling system we've built.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's very interesting. You described that, and I hadn't heard this phrase, but you describe it as vitals. Now,
Yes,
that's quite
device
interesting.
vitals.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it's a bit like when you go into an A&E department, which isn't called an A&E department in other countries, but that's our accident and emergency in the UK.
Right.
And what they look at is vitals. Now, the thing is, some of those vitals might be up and some of those vitals might be down, but the point is you're alive. The point is you're functioning. That's the point. So by describing as vitals, what you're saying is we're going to keep the device doing the job that we need it to do, which is not downtime, getting back to that business model point, but we're gonna keep an eye on the vitals, because the vitals can go up and down, but that doesn't mean that it's critical and we're flatlining. It just means we're keeping an eye on the vitals. That's a very lovely, I think it's a very cute analogy to describe devices out in the field. They are operating, but things will go up and down. And then the second point that you described is that like almost giving a consistent language, there's all these data points coming in, they're all coming in under different protocols, and somehow or another you have to have consistency so you can see them. So it may not be a good analogy to say a language, but essentially that's what's going on. You've got all these data points coming in, different protocols, different software, different data points, different sensors. You describe different sensors.
That's right.
So there's all sorts of, again, organized chaos coming in, but you have to have one dashboard that enables you to see the vitals and then see the details behind those vitals. Is that more or less what you're saying?
Exactly. It's we take this very, very wide variety of data and devices and we turn it into a single way to query and visualize that data that engineers, product managers, operations folks, and leaders at hardware companies can use to get the questions answered that they want answered. I also don't want to discount, Guy, the value of a system that scales. That's, it's not just that it's standardized or kind of unified, but it is also scalable, that it can work for large fleets of devices. I regularly see companies who will build a system, they'll slap a database with some UI, they plug it into something like Jupyter Notebook or some data science tools, and they'll start pushing device data and they'll make a nice dashboard where you can look at a device and you'll see some gauges for that device, okay? And that's nice for 100 devices because you can look at 100 devices sequentially and look at all their gauges, and that can work. But the day you've got millions of devices, now you need aggregation across a very, very large fleet. And aggregation is very complex, costly, and performance, sensitive. And so we find, I'll tell you an example, a company we work with in the fitness space, they had built this in-house, system that was working when they were relatively small. And they really, really care about battery life. And eventually, it turned out that when their fleet became very big, because they became a very successful company, all of a sudden, running their analysis to figure out the battery life of their fleet would take a week because it was so much data. And so now they were no longer as reactive and they didn't have the same feedback loop that they had gotten used to. And this is why they work with us now, is because we actually can give them that data in real time as their devices are working, instead of having to crunch the numbers for a week before anything can come up.
So plan for scale.
Exactly.
Yeah. So very good discussion about understanding vitals, understanding going into the granular detail behind that with all kinds of different protocols, and then planning for the future so that you have scale. There's one big question sitting behind all of this, is what happens when the connectivity goes off? How does because all of those things you absolutely need, but if the connectivity falls, however that device is connected, that's going to give your industrial design engineer a problem. So how does Memfault deal with that scenario? What's in the plan there?
Yeah, great question. So first, I think it's worth calling out that most connectivity issues that devices experience are intermittent. So it is rare that big bunch of devices completely lose network access. When that happens, that's usually a network issue, right? Your
And something worse might be afoot.
Exactly. Like it's not the devices that have a problem. It's the LTE tower is down or
Yeah.
the router was unplugged, right? So most issues that the designers of the device might care about are actually intermittent. Like connectivity isn't completely off; it is just unreliable. And so when that happens, we can cope quite well with unreliable connectivity when it comes to observability, because the amount of data that we need to send to accomplish our observability goal is very small, right? We can send a couple kilobytes of data a day and get so much visibility into our devices. So I think that's the first piece, which because we buffer the data on device, we have some sophisticated way that we decide when to upload data and when not to, we can tolerate a little bit of intermittent connectivity. And in fact, we've got customers who are Bluetooth connected. For example, I'll tell you, we have a customer who's a access control system for industrial and office environments, and they only have connectivity when a customer walks through the door of the device, because the phone connects to the lock and the lock gets connectivity. So super intermittent. And so the observability
and
data
random,
unpredictable.
Yeah.
Although, of course, the data is interesting. Like it ends up being a ton of people walk through at 9 a.m. and at 5 p.m.
Habits.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But the device spools the data in its storage and then uploads it opportunistically. When it comes to a device that loses connectivity altogether, I think observability data can still be useful for two reasons. Sometimes connectivity will come back, and then getting access to the historical data, what happens when we lost connectivity, can be very valuable. The other piece is sometimes the device never comes online and you have to send in a technician, or you've got to have the customer mail it back to the lab. And in that case, it is also very interesting to have that data still backed up on the device. Think of it as the black box of a plane, right? Being able to ask the device, what was going on that you lost connectivity? I had to dispatch a technician, but at the very least, I will get the data from my observability system that's been saved on the storage of the device so that I can figure out why did it lose connectivity. And you may find that it's a network, you may find that it's the device. Certainly good to have the data.
So in that sense, there's the cloud, but you're also saving and monitoring and keeping data on the device itself.
Exactly. So I think that's key for device observability.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very good. All right. So we've covered off 4 big subjects there. Let's just talk finally about. You just talked about cellular will drop out, devices will fall out. Maybe they need to go back to the lab. Maybe they need to go back to be fixed, or a technician needs to visit the site. How does Memfault give strategies and a platform to keep uptime to an absolute maximum?
Right. So the key piece of observability is being able to look at a glance at the overall performance of the fleet. So I was talking about those device vitals, right? I'll give you an example. It's about tracking the percentage of time that the device is able to connect to the internet, right? Through whatever mechanism you have. So you expect most devices, especially in industrial settings, to be connected 100% of the time. So let's say you put this on a dashboard, you see the percentage of the time the device is successfully connected. And if that percentage drops below 97 or 96%, you create an alert so that your engineering teams get pinged. That's the first thing. I think this is going back to your A&E, your emergency department analogy, right? The device vitals are the things that you check on everyone: their temperature, their blood pressure, their heart rate, right? You check it on everyone, not done after you know those things. It just tells you like, what's the ballpark of where we are at? Like, are we okay? Are we not okay? Is it critical? So those you put in a dashboards, and instead of having to go, take everybody's temperature one at a time, you've got an observability system that collects it from everyone live, so you can look at those high-level vitals in one place. That's really helpful to know when you should act. And then the second piece, continuing with your analogy, is okay, now we have someone whose vitals don't look right. We have to go and do diagnostics. We have to go and draw blood. We have to go and take an MRI. We have to go and do all these things. And with your observability system, you can do the same with your device. You dig into the device and you look at memory dumps, you look at logs of the device, you look at high resolution telemetry being collected from the device. And now you go really from that high level view down to individual device views and see, why is this specific device having some issues, right? And you have also powerful analytics to do that. And so with the combo of the high level vitals that tell you, are things green, yellow, or red, and then having the detailed diagnostics so that you can get to a root cause and solve the problem, you can get the best uptime possible, because you know how things are working, and when they're not working, you have the data you need to quickly bring them back to health.
Yeah, because you can see themes and therefore predict things that are potentially going to go wrong. So
exactly.
Being able to see things enables you to predict the future and see themes and see potentially what you might be having to deal with in the future. Back to the A&E.
Exactly.
Analogy. Okay. Well, I think that's a really fascinating look at how an industrial design engineer would use Memfault's software and platform, as you call observability, which I think is an absolutely key word in this, observability platform, which enables you to see everything, whether it be tens, hundreds, or thousands of devices. We've gone through the fact that most people very naturally have a legacy. They have they've incrementally been trying to improve their system all the time. And what you're saying is, hang on, let's just have one set of way of looking at vitals. We call them vitals, and then going deeper into that, then dealing with connectivity, and then dealing with uptime. So I think that's been I think that gives a design engineer in industrial applications a really good overview of what Memfault can offer them. So one very last question: if somebody wants to evaluate Memfault, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
The easiest way is to come to our website, memfault.com. You can sign up for an account and take a look. There's usually a link that you can follow to get an interactive demo as well, which gives you a really good understanding of how things work. And most importantly, we're always happy to chat. You can contact us, email us. There's a form on the website you can fill. We're always happy to give you a more kind of dedicated demo and evaluation.
Very, very good. So very, very easy to go and find out how you can use this software to look at your system, improve it, and keep its uptime to a maximum. Francois, thank you very much for that introduction. Excellent. Thank you very much. And we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Hey, yo, where my engineers at?